We have the honor this morning of speaking with Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer, and he's asked me to, or suggested I refer to him as Tony on second reference. So, hello, I'm going to call you Colonel one time. Colonel Shaffer, how are you doing?
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me. No, it's good to be here. Thank you for that. And, it's, I was trying to explain in the pre-interview, we operatives always go by first names, no matter what the rank is. So
Okay.
It's in a different world than I think most people understand about the military. It's just different. So, but I appreciate joining you today for your show.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You've been on a lot of very prestigious programs. So really, it's an honor to have you on the King's Report as well.
Well, thank you.
Now, you wrote a memoir about your 5 months of experience in Afghanistan, titled Operation Dark Heart.
Right.
And the story about that book is very interesting in itself, but that's something that we'll have to get into at some other time, because right now, there you go, the book, yes.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, we'll all have to read it ourselves, because today it looks like the world may be facing something much, much worse than Afghanistan, and I think we want to get your opinions and your information about what's going on there.
Sure.
And let me start off, with the thing that's really on my mind, and perhaps many of our viewers as well. Are we in a situation like Europe was in the 1910s and late 30s and early 40s, where a series of events leads us into a worldwide conflagration where we find ourselves in a world war?
To summarize, my assessment is that miscalculation is the largest threat to global peace. That is to say, like World War I and the assassination of Prince Ferdinand, that cascaded into a number of other things. And I think that's where we're at right now. There's a number of powder kegs in the world, not just the Middle East. I mean, there's Africa, there's the South China Sea. There's more competition ongoing there than people understand regarding resources. There's been face-offs between the CCP, People's Republic of China Navy, and the Philippines and South Korea and Japan over resources in the Pacific. And then, of course, Taiwan, and not to mention Russia and Ukraine. So it's essentially a global powder keg. And unfortunately, my belief, Tim, is that while you would believe we would need men of sound thinking and steady heart, you've got the high school debating team in charge. You've got Tony Blinken, who's more worried about playing a rock and roll guitar than doing his job as Secretary of State, and Joe Biden, who looks literally like everything he does has to be fed to him or read from a script, to include the recent events of him going to visit Israel, and his just looking literally like a zombie, like a character out of The Walking Dead. So it's a grave situation. I think it's as bad as most people interpret it to be right now, and we just don't have the best and brightest in charge of our nation right now. So
we're doing this interview on Wednesday, and yesterday on Tuesday there was this terrible situation where a hospital suffered an explosion. And looking at the situation, I tend to believe that there's more credibility what the Israelis are saying about it, where this was caused by a misfire, by a missile, maybe by the Islamic Jihad. But the Palestinian side, though, seems to getting some success, a great deal of success in getting world opinion on its side and a lot of sympathy from around the world as a result of this situation, no matter who may have actually caused it.
Well, that's the game of propaganda. So one of the things that I actually read an article on this yesterday regarding Army commanders. Back when I was in the field, the internet was brand new. I ran the first undercover cyber unit, Stratus Ivy, and some other things in the late 90s. Nobody understood it. And even now, almost 25 years later, we still have people who don't understand information operations or digital threat. And to your point, Tim, I mean, Hamas knows the truth. They know that an errant rocket fired by their side caused the 500 people to be dead. Doesn't matter, because they're going to now use that as a propaganda tool to say, no, the Israelis are lying. They always lie. So the truth is the first casualty in most wars, and this is no different. And yeah, I do. I've looked at this very carefully. I've been talking about this in the media. First off, those missiles that are being fired out of the West Bank are essentially terror weapons. Every one of them is a terror weapon, and I think they proved their point by hitting their own position here. It's tragic.
You said West Bank. Did you mean Gaza?
I meant Gaza. I'm sorry. I meant Gaza. Yeah. But so yeah, the tragedy is that, their own weapon made their point. It's like, this is a terror weapon, but they're going to try to use that now as a propaganda victory for their side. And of course, they have mainstream media folks who are happy to carry the water for them.
Do you at least give them, the Islamic Jihad or Hamas, the benefit of the doubt that this was not intentional, that this was unintentional?
So based on what I've seen, and the Israelis released at the time we're taping this, the audio intercepted of two guys who were, they're saying Hamas were talking. I tend to believe that tape is correct. And yeah, if you look at the cluster of rockets, these things, I don't know how much you've studied the old Soviet Union and their doctrine. There was something called free rockets over ground, frogs. And they're unguided weapons. You just fire them and hope for the best, literally. And so in this case, because we're not talking about high-tech weapons, we're talking about essentially weapons that they fire. They go off in a direction. And there's like a chart that the Israelis had, which actually I think makes this point. The other rockets that were fired off in this cluster, I think there was 5 or 6, they were all going in a trajectory towards Israel and over the hospital. So no, I don't believe I don't think they meant to do this. I don't think even in their most horrific attempts at propaganda or information to use against the Israelis would they have contemplated hitting a hospital of this magnitude. I think it was an accident. I think they caused their own damage.
Okay. Well, you're the expert. But just it seemed that kind of a coincidence that this would happen just before the United States president, such as he is, would be visiting, and this caused, of course, the cancellation of the summit that was going to take place in Jordan with King Abdullah and Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, and with President Sisi of Egypt, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems that Hamas really gained a great deal as a result of this incident.
They did, and they are. Look, Hamas is out to win this. I'm not pro-Hamas, obviously, but I'm saying they have committed themselves to a course of action where it's going to be victory or death, literally. I mean, literally, that's what they're faced with at this point. They've opened this door. The Israelis are more than happy to go through it in a very careful way. And so, yeah, they're trying everything they can to do two primary things. First off, disrupt and prevent the Israelis from coming in any great strength. That's why they've got the hostages. That's why they're doing all this other propaganda stuff. They've got the Arab world not willing to accept them. I mean, Tony Blinken was rejected serially by the Saudis. The Saudis, basically, he flew in and they made him wait overnight before they saw him. I mean, they made him cool his heels. Jordan, the king, basically said, no, we're not going to support moving Palestinian refugees into our territory. And President al-Sisi actually chided Blinken to his face. And by the way, this is all available on the State Department website. I'm not saying anything is not available to the public to look at for themselves and judge what happened. I mean, the State Department's put out readouts of these things. So I'm just saying Blinken is not doing well, but Hamas is. Hamas is doing everything they can to upstage the United States. So that's the first point, is disrupt what that's going on. Secondly, because they are a proxy of Iran, Iran is also being very successful in using them to pour cold water on the growing relationship between the Saudis and Israelis. There was about to be an historic recognition of the Israelis by the Saudis. And I think I would not put past the Iranians for a minute using Hamas and causing the organization and the people of Palestine their death if it meant disrupting the continued progress in what was started as the Abraham Accords by President Trump and continued in some form by the Arabs to move forward with kind of regularizing commerce and diplomatic relationships. So I think those are the two things that Hamas is willing to do, willing to disrupt moving their own citizens and willing to be an extension of the Iranians, since the Iranians have been their biggest nation-state ally.
I think one thing that many of us have difficulty understanding is why are the Palestinians so unpopular? Why won't Egypt accept them? Even closing the Rafah crossing in Saudi Arabia and Jordan, as you said, nobody wants them. And there's a group of Republicans on the Congress saying no Palestinians should be allowed to enter the United States. This is a point that I don't understand.
Well, two reasons. First, as we've learned from Afghanistan and other places, you can't screen these people. There's no way you can actually do a credible job of trying to figure out who the good guys and bad guys are, and it's unfortunate. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a population of about 2.3 million people in Gaza. And of that, you're talking between 30 and 50,000 Hamas, a smattering of others, under 100,000 troops and folks who support it. But how do you sort through that? So, and also you have to remember, Tim, there was a history back in the 70s and 80s of refugees in both Jordan and Egypt. While neither the current king was in charge then, nor was President al-Sisi in charge, he was, I think, a young officer then. They remember what happened. They remember the refugees. And the belief is once these Palestinians get transferred out of Gaza, they ain't going back, and we're stuck with them. That's part of the concern as well. So neither country wants that burden, especially if there's no guarantee by the West, by the United States, since Blinken's pushing this, that basically it's not going to happen. And again, I would recommend people go back and look at the Blinken readout with the meeting with al-Sisi. Al-Sisi lays this out very clearly. And it's to the point of where he's actually, I would say, rude, and rightfully so in many ways, because of the way Blinken presents information to Blinken saying, this is not going to happen. We're not opening the gates, and just give it up. And I think that's what is going to result. There's going to be no mass migration of Palestinians out of Gaza at this point.
Well, even the Rafah crossing is closed to humanitarian aid headed into Gaza.
Right.
What's the reasoning there?
Well, same thing. It's like the Egyptians don't really want to be involved. I think I'm convinced at this point that both sides, both Jordan and Egypt, both sides kind of on the periphery of Egypt, of the Israeli nation, just don't want to be involved. It's like it's time to get things resolved. And I'll tell you who's really benefiting from this. A guy named Vladimir Putin. Putin has called around, but during the same time, the Biden administration has been doing all this other stuff. Putin has called and talked to every leader you and I have talked about, except for Biden. He wouldn't call Biden, but he's talked to all these other leaders. He's talked to the Saudis. He's even talked to the Israelis. He's done telephone diplomacy, and he's trying to basically create conditions for a rapprochement. And guess where he's at right now? Putin is actually in Beijing with Xi on a BRICS conference. So while we're seeing all of the Biden kind of wailing and gnashing of teeth and, oh, this is terrible, Putin's behind the scenes doing his own thing. And I'm just telling you that based on the fact that our allies no longer see Biden and his staff, Blinken especially, as credible. And it's anybody, Tim, this is not something I have to convince you of. Just go look. Just go look at the interviews with Biden, with Blinken. Blinken looks like a man out of his element who's actually worried about how he's going to be able to contain and continue his work, because nobody's buying into what he's asked him to do. And secondly, obviously, Biden just doesn't look like a guy who knows what he's doing. So as tragic as that is and everything else that's going on, Putin is seen as the strong horse by a lot of the folks who are involved in the discussions.
And oh yes, there is another war in what was it? Oh yeah, Ukraine.
Yeah,
that's right. About Ukraine. It's yesterday's news.
Yeah. Well, by the way, as part of that war is impacting on what's going on. So one of the reasons that the offensive has been delayed by the Israelis is because the United States raided the wartime stocks back in January of this year for Ukraine. So 155, 105 artillery rounds are short because we've moved them all out. So that's another thing the Israelis are going to need, and then they don't have. So I think that's another planning factor that the Biden administration cannot overcome. There's just not enough ammunition to go around all of the requirements. And I think a lot of folks know that. So yeah, it's another thing that's impacting on the U.S.'s ability to support the Israelis. And of course, Zelensky now is kind of the second-hand, toy right now that nobody wants to deal with. And I just don't. I think U.S. support for Ukraine is about to kind of bottom out. So can we just sort of summarize and say, okay, that war is over.
Russia's won, and now we're moving on to something else.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've said this, Tim. I don't know if you've seen the interviews. I've said it's like Russia was going to win. If you simply look at the numbers are not there for a Ukrainian victory. They weren't from day one. And I'm not pro-Russian. I have to always caveat this because it's like I fought the Cold War. We devoted massive resources, and I very well thought I was going to die as a very young lieutenant in Germany during the 80s because I thought that's where it's all going to end. I really believed that. So we all were committed to beating the Soviet Union, and we did. I'm a Reagan guy. I love, I'm still friends and mentored by the Reagan folks. Bud McFarlane was a close friend and mentor before he passed. So I believe in the cause of freedom and beating the Russians. With that said, Russia was never going to lose this. They made it very clear from the beginning, and they've devoted immense resources to it. And I've said, unless there's a third party, a third nation or nations coming in on Ukraine's side, the numbers aren't there. Ukraine's just not going to win. And no matter how much you give them high-tech weapons and hope for the best, it's not a good strategy. And here we are. The Russians are about to return to the offensive. As a matter of fact, they are on the offensive in some spots right now. And Zelensky is on the ropes. So it's unless there's some interdiction, use of NATO ground forces, it's pretty much over at this point. So,
okay, well, let's get back to Gaza.
Yeah.
Ukraine is like yesterday's news. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a summary on time.com about the sort of the show of force that the United States is trying to project, where there's an aircraft carrier strike group in the Eastern Mediterranean already, another strike group headed there as well. And let's see, 3 Marine warships are moving into the region, scores of aircraft dispatched to U.S. military bases around the Middle East, and American Special Operations Forces working with Israel military and planning and intelligence. All this apparently intended to deter Iran. Is that going to work? Is it going to be enough?
Well, the military force, in theory, yes, but the perception of Biden being weak, no. This is the thing. It's like you could have the most amazing military force in the world. You could have the best technology, the best weapons. But if the perception is you either will not use it effectively or use it at all, then it doesn't matter. Sun Tzu once said in his teachings, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And so they've got a lot of tactics. What you're talking about here, we put a lot of tactics. We're doing the show of forces, that and the other, but nobody believes it. Nobody cares. Again, that's why I think Putin's making such headway behind the scenes, talking to these leaders. During the Cold War, no one would have ever taken the call from Gorbachev in a situation like this. Just think about that. Brezhnev would not have had. As a matter of fact, we were facing off effectively against the Russians during the Yom Kippur War. We were actually in there doing this very thing. When this happened, Nixon was actually doing what Biden's doing, except the one difference, people did not believe Nixon was bluffing, and the Russians backed down. So I do believe people should go back and look at Yom Kippur, 73 years ago, I guess, or not 53 years ago. I'm easing myself there. 53 years ago. Go look at it. No, what am I saying? 53. So is it 50 years ago?
50 years ago, yes. 1973, yes.
Yeah, 73. So the 73 war. I mean, look at what happened with with Nixon and what they did. They did a series of deterrents which stopped the Russians from getting involved. And so it worked. But I don't think it's going to work here because no one believes Biden to be credible, or those working for Biden to be credible as well. So it's all about perception. And the perception is there's not going to be any strong action by Biden.
Yeah, the Soviet Union and now Russia, of course, have always been interested in getting more involved in the Middle East for geopolitical reasons. And looks like now their time has come.
Absolutely. I agree with your assessment. And that's, again, it is what it is. Even our allies such as Egypt is buying Russian-made stuff. Bud McFarlane, speaking of Bud and I went there in 2013, and we met with the senior Egyptian leaders, and they said, look, we don't want to deal with Russia. They can be undependable and very much put conditions on what they want. But if you don't sell us what we need, and this is back when they needed helicopters and some fighters, we're going to buy it from them. So the Egyptians warned us. And some of this got fixed under Trump, and then it went back to the way it was under, just like it was under Obama, it's back under that with Biden. So So when the Egyptians don't get the support they need when they need it, and we come knocking saying, hey, do you mind moving these refugees into your nation? No, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Now I'm going to ask you to pull out your the crystal ball that I'm sure you have somewhere in your desk there and tell us what's going to happen with Iran. Is Iran going to get directly involved? And also China. How's China going to use this for their interests?
So China, let's start with China first. So China, one of the concerns I have is a three-front war, or having to support three fronts, Ukraine, and Middle East, and now China, because China, I think, has a potential of doing something. Will they do something now? No. I don't think they're going to do something within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think their next decision point is going to be in January during the Taiwanese elections. One of the things that China is going to look to do, like Hamas did with the Israelis, is look to find a period when there's internal strife within the country. So would China do something against Taiwan? Yeah, I think it's very possible, but they're going to do something when the Taiwanese are most disoriented and disorganized. And that's going to be during their elections in January. So I would see China potentially doing something in January. And you and I both know, Tim, it's going to take a while for all of this stuff to unwind. So I think that's when if they're going to act, they're going to act in January. So let's go back and talk about what was the other country you wanted to talk about?
Iran.
So Iran, the mullahs, I think, are trying to figure out what's the best course of action for their continued benefit. The Biden administration has been trying their best to give them benefit. They've actually paid this $6 billion as part of a ransom deal. And the Biden group want to re-establish the joint agreed upon framework for the nuclear program regarding Iran. And ultimately, I think the Iranians are going to get everything they want. As a matter of fact, quietly yesterday, one of the things that went unreported, virtually unreported, was the Biden administration allowing for the UN prohibition against Iran developing ballistic missile technology to go away. Basically, it expired. And so I think that was another concession the Bidens gave Iran to keep them on the sidelines. So I think the Biden folks plan on a strategy of appeasement. I don't think it's going to work. I think the Iranians are going to take everything that they're given and go for more. So, but I don't think it'll be military action immediately. Again, I think they're going to push this off until probably the spring. So, if the Iranians decide on any military action.
What about this? There was one analyst who was saying that, the Chinese military has not had any combat experience since they lost to Vietnam in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So before attacking Taiwan, maybe they'll do sort of a practice war against another country.
Yeah, I don't
like a Central Asian country or even Mongolia, which has virtually no military. Would be very easy just to sort of get into practice before they attack Taiwan.
No, I don't think so. They've got far too many problems to go for a test run. They've got internal problems. They got the CPI, their Consumer Price Index. Mm-hmm. They've been trying to replace ministers quietly. No, I think if they're going to do it, they're going to do it with what they got. They've been developing a doctrine to use and created units to be amphibious along their coast near Taiwan, and they've been developing their military for purposes but basically the Navy, trying to expand the Navy rapidly. No, I think they're going to go for a combination of a small footprint combat force to go in and take control of Taiwan if they do it. They don't want a full-blown invasion of Taiwan. They want to take it as peacefully as possible because the great prize there is the industrial resources of Taiwan. Taiwan is the global foundry of chips, to include Chinese chips. So they want to minimize any interference with that.
So kind of a special forces operation, or is that what you're talking about?
Yes, much more special forces, much less heavy tank divisions and things like that storming the beaches.
I see. Not a D-Day Normandy Beach type of situation.
No, I think they want people to believe that, but no, I don't. That Taiwan Strait, that's a tough body of water. So we count on them trying that and having enough time to use our aircraft carriers to basically destroy their fleet. They know that too. So this is going to be much more subterfuge, and I think they're going to go for more of a coup d'etat, special operations force takedown of Taiwan. So if they do it.
And can you talk a little bit about North Korea in that situation? Will North Korea be tasked to attack U.S. bases in South Korea?
Well, I think they would be disruptive. The North Koreans have their own objectives. Un has his own way of looking at the world, and he is a client state of China. So if something happens, then yeah, you're going to see them act out. You're going to see them do things in the joint security area and with the North Korean Navy, no doubt. But I don't see them doing a full-blown invasion because as much as anything, these South Koreans are very resilient and very capable. They have their own defense industry. Heck, I drive a South Korean car. I'm very happy with my Kona, which is made by Hyundai. So I think the South Koreans, like the Israelis, could handle the North Koreans very handily if they had to.
And Japan, of course, in preparation for this kind of situation, has been building up its defenses.
It has.
And they've, of course, scrapped that long time cap that they had of 1% of GDP for the defense. And I think maybe they're up to about 2% now or something like that. Although Kishida is said to be rather more sort of pro-Chinese, certainly more than Abe was. How's Japan going to play into this?
So Japan is an interesting character by the fact that they have their own interests. They're a very close ally, and I think they see the Chinese expansion as unhelpful because they too are fishing for protein. There's a big protein. Japan is a very isolated nation. They depend on the sea a lot. That includes for food. So does China. So that's where a competition is naturally coming, and the Japanese plan on defending their equities. Also, beyond conventional forces, the Japanese no longer trust us to be part of our nuclear umbrella. Sources I find credible have told me that the Japanese nuclear weapons program is at any given time about 6 months out from having a weapon.
Yes, I've heard that too.
And I believe it.
Yes, so we hope that things don't go too far out of hand. I'm afraid we're out of time, but yeah, it'd be great to be able to spend a whole afternoon with you just picking your brain, but I'm afraid
Thanks,
we're out of time. I appreciate it again. Now, you are president of Project Sentinel, I believe, right?
Project Sentinel, yeah, Project Sentinel.
And the London
Center for Policy Research, yeah.
Right.
That's New York based. Yeah.
But you are not in the United Kingdom.
No. So
many people may make that mistake.
We're in the process of probably shutting down London Center because it's just tough to run two think tanks and they do a lot of the same things, both of them. So we're probably going to consolidate things into Project Sentinel. So we're kind of
tell us about Project Sentinel. What does it do?
Constitution-based national security, foreign policy, and economics.
Okay. And let me see. Your website you still have londoncenter.org as your website.
We do, and that's still up and running. And we have London, and we have projectsentinel.com, which is now being established.
Okay. All right. So let's buy the book. Let's go to the website. And thank you very much. I see that you have, I guess it's a Reagan t-shirt that you have on.
I do. Right? I'm wearing my Reagan t-shirt that I got from
1880?
1980.
1980. Okay.
1980.
The crease made it look like 1880. All right. 1980. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
I really appreciate everything that you've given us today, and have a good day.
Thank you.